In this episode, join me as I speak to Aditi, Patil, and Manya Singh, the founders of Conservation Indica, a young NGO working primarily towards the conservation of the Surendranagar grasslands in Gujarat. We also talk about their work in Lahaul forest divisions in Himachal Pradesh. As always, 30% of the revenue generated from optional paid subscriptions on Substack and YouTube will be donated to conservation projects like Conservation Indica. So welcome, Manya
Yeah,
and Aditi to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
thank you. Hi. Thanks.
How did both of you get into conservation?
Okay, I'll go first. So we both have like a different trajectory to the world of conservation. For one, I have my training in botany in my undergrads, and then I did ecology masters, and I started working in the development sector for conservation research and conservation action. So mine is quite linear in that sense. And then after working for almost 7, 8 years in the sector, I am sure that it is my calling. So that's how. Aditi? Yeah, so my journey was not as straightforward. I've done my bachelor's in engineering, in computer engineering, and I used to work with a software company in Hyderabad for 2 years. And while working there, I was also volunteering for Blue Cross, which is an animal rescue organization. And then I realized that I want to do more of this and just generally looking at climate change and how things are happening in the world. And being in a cubicle working on software, I felt like I was sort of having an existential crisis, which everyone sort of goes through in their 20s. So then I thought of changing my field. I couldn't then jump into botany or zoology or something. So there was an interdisciplinary course, Masters in Development Studies. I did that. And then I did my internships with Aga Khan Rural Support Program in the Dams district of Gujarat to study Forest Rights Act. And from there, then I got into conservation. I worked with WWF India. Then I worked with the Ministry of Environment and Forest as a young professional in Delhi. And then with WCS in India. And since then, I've been in conservation.
What is the idea behind Conservation Indica?
So when I and Manya were working with all these different organizations, there was a project in which both of us happened to land up together as project associates. This project was about studying the national agroforestry policy of India. So there was Mr. Arun Dixit, Dr. Arun Dixit, who was the principal investigator of that project, and both of us were working with him. While working, we became friends and we had similar concerns about how conservation research is done in the country. So we bonded over that, mainly about how there is a lack of people's involvement in nature conservation research in India. And since then, we've been friends, even though we were working in different locations, different organizations, we've always been in touch. And then after so many years and after getting a lot of experience and seeing the same problem being replicated across fields, we thought that we have now gained enough experience and enough insights to be able to start something new, something of our own, to be able to work more creatively, more freely. So that is the idea behind Conservation Indica, to improve, to increase people's participation in nature conservation research and to make nature conservation research actually work for people, make it more accessible for them, especially to the most marginalized communities. We have worked in research organization, we have worked in grassroots action groups, and the gap that persisted, even if one is providing the other with the knowledge, and the knowledge is sometimes not coming, the issue that is on the ground is not even remotely touching, that the knowledge is not being able to uplift the action group or the practitioners. So these are the issues, some of the issues that were very, very evident, and these contradictory approaches in the conservation sector is something that told us that you have to at least try. So conservation indica is also something, it's not that we know the blueprint, how we are gonna make that change, but it is out of the frustration that nothing is happening, or maybe something is happening, but it's not enough. So that's how we ended up starting it and working towards this.
So, what is conservation research for you?
So any kind of research I feel should tackle problems that have the highest priority in the society. And often it doesn't happen that way. So similarly in conservation also, we see that there's been a lot of work on tigers and protected areas and mostly for tiger reserves. So for us, when we have worked so much in conservation with different organizations, like Manya said, all types of organizations, and then I did an MPhil in conservation leadership from Cambridge last year, and I could see similar problems happen globally in terms of the application of research. And that's why we feel like sort of turning the whole system, there has to be a 180-degree flip of the research system entirely. The problems which affect the most marginalized people need to be tackled first. So I was giving the examples of tigers and tiger reserves. So they have been funded since the 70s. So when Project Tiger came. And after that, there's been no charismatic animal even coming close to the tiger, which has gotten enough or even similar attention or funding. So we sort of want to change that. And for me, the conservation research, the idea of conservation research is that trying to focus on lesser charismatic but equally important ecosystems, equally important species in nature.
And adding to that, there is also this thing that we have realized that as a researcher, your positionality as a researcher is something that always brings their own bias, their methodology, the way you land up on a research gap or an idea that motivates you to make a hypothesis and work towards it. But many things are happening and things are not in isolation on the ground. There's a lot of disciplines moving parallelly on the ground. So that is also another thing that kept bothering me, and and that is why we are trying to redefine or reimagine the conservation research that is needed. It's not like it cannot move in isolation from the everyday lives that is an amalgamation of many things at once. So that is also there.
So, Conservation Indica is working on a project which is developing integrated conservation and development for the Lahaul Forest Department. Talk about this.
That was the first project which we did as Conservation Indica. We registered in January, and then this project, I think we started in September, October. No, sorry, March. Okay, forget about timeline, but I think, it was with the Himachal Forest Department, and every forest division in India has a working plan. And the plan essentially informs about how the forest area under that division is to be managed for the next 10 years. So it is sort of a guiding book for all the forest officers in that division. And that is built after certain research is done about that particular forest area, the kind of species there are, the kind of grasses, kind of wildlife, and the people that interact around that forest division, like pastoral communities, and how and where they graze their animals. So we were helping the Lahaul Forest Division develop their working plan, and essentially we contributed to the ecotourism chapter, wherein I and Manya calculated the carrying capacities of a lot of tourism sites. And then we also contributed to the grazing chapter, which involved talking to the Gaddi community, which is a pastoral community in the Himalayas, and trying to ascertain what are the challenges that they face Has the human-wildlife conflict increased? What are the kind of grass species that the animals graze upon? What are the invasive species that have come up in their grazing pastures? So yeah, that was the project.
So much of your work has been in the Surendranagar grassland. Talk about the landscape. What is the biodiversity like?
Surendranagar is in Gujarat. It is in the middle of western and the northern parts of Gujarat, and it's also the gateway to the southwest region of Gujarat. So Gujarat itself is a very big state in India. Surendranagar is essentially is a typical savanna grassland, which has which used to have contiguous grasslands in the past, but obvious reasons of development and fragmentation and things like that have changed the ecology a little bit. And also with plantation programs and the invasive species advent, the grasslands and the savanna grasslands are also a bit turned into a mesquite based woodland or shrubland, if we can say that. So this is the ecology of the region.
So talk about the beyond protected areas biodiversity conservation in Surendranagar's Commons project.
Uh, so Surendranagar Commons project is a project that that happens in a socio-ecological landscape. And why we've said that it is beyond protected areas is much of the conservation happens in India in those protected boundaries where community is not there, or maybe if they were there, they are ousted and rehabilitated, and the area is earmarked for just conservation. So this whole idea of fortress conservation is very prominent in India. And even when people talk about people, even when people talk about community-based conservation, it's only the participation to achieve conservation goals, and it is not so designed as a shared landscape. So it's not something that it is a shared landscape and people, wildlife and people and livestock coexist together, and there are always interactions. There are negative interactions and positive interactions. But because the ownership of the land is such that forest department gives up on the conservation idea, NGOs gives up on the idea of conservation in these common lands. So we wanted to do something. We wanted to establish a system and a demonstrated model in which commons could be, because there is a lot of wildlife movement. The wildlife, it doesn't see the political boundary. It keeps moving, and there is a mobility of leopards, Indian grey wolves, striped hyenas, foxes, jackals, and much more of wildlife in these landscapes as well. So we wanted to do a conservation model which is led by community, and community is owning the data. And
What are the primary threats to this open natural ecosystem and how can they be countered?
yeah, I can give it a go, and then Aditi, you can add later.
Ah.
So the landscape, like I said, it is now fragmented. So a lot of urbanization and industrialization has took place. Gujarat is also the development model of India, and many. So there are mines, there are coal mines, there is ceramic industry, then there is large green renewable infrastructure such as wind turbines and solar farms. So all this has taken up the space, and it has taken up the space of the commons, because these commons are under the revenue land, and revenue lands, some portions like the wasteland, quote unquote, the wasteland of India is earmarked for these infrastructure. So the productivity of that land can be improved. So this whole idea of increasing the productivity of the land and not recognizing the ecosystem as a grassland or as a desert ecosystem or a semi-arid ecosystem is highly problematic, and these are the larger issues in this landscape. Additionally, this is also the colonial approach of forest department, in which they want to turn every area they control into a forested area. So in the grassland, there is a monoculture plantation happening left, right, center, which is also changing the ecosystem while also impacting the pastoralists that are inhabited that inhabit these landscapes. So there is Gujarati semi-nomadic ethnic groups called Rabaris or Bharwads, and they rear sheep and goat and other livestock. And with the shrinking of the pastures and grasslands, things have become very difficult in Surendranagar. Other than that, there are biological issues also. Like there is an invasion by alien invasive species. There is Prosopis juliflora is there, Senna uniflora is also there. Then you can also see Congress grass there. You can also see Lantana camara there. So those are also the issues in the landscape. And then we have this whole one project that we are focused on, and this is one of the many issue is the predators and pastoralist conflict. So livestock depredation is another issue, which is leading to negative interactions between pastoralists and carnivores, wild carnivores of Surendranagar. So these.
So, talk about some of the key factors which influence conflict in the landscape.
So, like Manya counted all the threats that happen in the grasslands and the commons. The very visible outcomes is that people don't take the landscapes very seriously in terms of actions like dumping waste over there. And this waste is of all kinds of waste, from household dustbins to the mug dumping that is done by ceramic factories. And now there's also a highway expansion being planned, which just grasslands on both sides of the highway. And the pastoral communities also use the highway as part of their grazing route because it was their grazing route since many, many decades. It's just that while infrastructure planning, nobody took this into account. So these are some factors which sort of influence the conflict and increase it. There's other factors, illegality, which Manya also explained that the commons are not legally protected because they fall under the revenue area and not under the forest department. The land which is under the forest department, the reserve forest, they are practicing monoculture over there. So these are some factors. Then you have your everyday Indian society's factors like the caste system, then upper caste will be more dominant in the decision making. So in all the Gram Panchayat meetings, the pastoral communities will not have a stronger voice to sort of talk about their issues that the pastoral pastures are facing or the livestock are facing. There are veterinary issues also. There's not enough veterinary access in these villages sometimes. So these are some things that contribute to the existing conflict.
Additionally, what is also happening is, like Aditi told about the socially dominant groups. So grasslands are the most widely, used land systems that are being converted. So grasslands are converted into agriculture lands, and these agriculture lands on the grasslands are nothing but encroachment, and these are encroachment by the socially dominant members of the community itself. So the intra-community conflict is there, and also because shrinking grasslands are pushing the herbivores away. So the present population of chinkara has declined Indian gazelle has declined very, very rapidly. And so the wild carnivores of the wild carnivores of the Surendranagar landscapes are killing more and more pastoral livestock, sheep and goat, because of the easy access and presence of the livestock. And these pastoralists are then are in another conflict, which is with the forest department, because when these uh, episodes of livestock depredation happens, the compensation claim filings, it is a tedious process. Even the rate that they get, the offered amount is far less than the market rate of the animal lost. So these are some of the intertwined issues that are aggravating the conflict in the region, whether it is intra-community with bureaucrats or departments, with people and wild animals. So these are some of the key factors that we know from the landscape.
Talk about your predator and pastorals project in the landscape and how the project contributes to the well-being of locals and their livelihoods.
So what we are trying to do in this project is that firstly, we are trying to understand the compensation scheme of the Gujarat Forest Department. What are the challenges which people are facing in accessing the compensations? Whether the compensation amount is enough, does it match the market rates of the livestock being lost to wildlife attacks? And from anecdotal evidence and our initial interactions with the pastoral communities, the amount being offered is much lesser than the market rate of the livestock. So we will try and conduct as many meetings and consultations with the communities, with the forest department and the Gram Panchayat members to make the system more accessible, easier, because currently a lot of people just don't apply, as it doesn't make sense for them to apply for a mere 3,000 rupees of compensation when the actual market rate is around 10,000 or 12,000 for a goat that is being attacked by a leopard. So first is understanding the compensation system, trying to match the amount and trying to make it easier. Secondly, as part of our project and the larger idea of Conservation Indica is to have science and data more accessible as part of conservation research efforts that we do. So we want to involve the youth from the from the pastoral communities to be involved with us while we set up camera traps in the region. The camera traps will help us identify which are the locations where leopards or wolves or hyenas tend to live or have the denning sites. We also have some locations about where the attacks have happened. So all of this that we will do to understand the animal behavior, wildlife behavior, will be done along with the young people from these communities so that we are only facilitating and it is ultimately their data. And of course, when they are doing this with us, they will be paid from the project expenses. So in one small way, we will try and have some form of livelihood. And going ahead, we want to make this into a landscape level conservation action plan, wherein maybe the Gram Panchayat or the forest department of that region can adapt this and people can be employed for carrying out such studies. So this is about the livelihoods. And overall, around 20,000 hectares of grasslands can be improved is the long-term plan of the project. And if grasslands are improved, then everyone's livelihood is secured because that was the root cause of the problem, that there's not enough grassland, the grassland are shrinking. So in short, that is what we are trying to do.
So, what have been some of the key challenges you have faced at Conservation Indica?
Yeah, because we're very new. Initial struggles, like every new organization, is the fundraising struggle that we are going through right now also. But we are constantly networking and being in touch with like-minded people. So we have raised some initial seed grants. Apart from that, I think we are enjoying the process. What do you say, Manya?
Yes, we are actually enjoying the process, but true about this that the fundraising has been quite overwhelming, because I don't know, I say this quite often that when one starts a non-profit at at such an age as ours, we are mostly fueled by our passion and the interest that we have, and it's never about money. On money about it's not about wealth generation. We are not here to generate wealth and then do philanthropies later. So this is something that, after seeing how fundraising has become in the sector, it's quite a little discouraging at this stage. But since we have been also getting some positive responses and some people who are putting in funds for our mission, so it's a mix of feelings. The challenges are this only. Another challenge is to also you build a team. So a good team that you want to build, and young people joining us to achieve their own passion and goals, and while also aligning with the vision and mission of the organization, is something that we feel is it's it's tricky. And with the not with onset of COVID, after remote working and work from home has become such a such a big thing, it's very difficult to understand how to model it when most of your work is on the field, on the ground, in rural landscapes, in socio-ecological spaces. So these are some of the, now we are at the employer end of the table. So these are some things that we toy around with. How do we want to create a system that works, and also make the conservationist happy. It does not fill them with gloom. So these are some of the things at early stages of becoming a founder, I guess.
And how can individuals contribute to your organization?
Well, we always, as Manya was saying, we want to build a team. So we encourage all the young and upcoming researchers to look up our website, see if they can resonate with our ideology and write to us, follow us on our social media. In Instagram, we have been trying to come up with really new and cool things. Recently, there was Wildlife Week. And if you follow us, Anish, you'll see a comic or a meme, which sort of is political in nature. So these are the things that we feel that need to be said now and have not been said in so many words previously, which needs to change. So we are doing really cool things on social media as well. So we encourage new researchers to look that up, join us for internships, field experiences, even if they want to test their ideas out and can't find the usual traditional organizations suitable enough, then we are there for experimentation. And yeah, I mean, like all the individuals, the usual donation and those traditional means also are there. People can also create art and tag us. That is something that we are actively doing and Conservation Indica. And reshare our posts on social media. And just by being better citizens for conservation, I think everybody can make a difference.
And what have been some of your most memorable moments from your conservation career?
Manya, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I can go. So although the whole journey is quite has been quite a ride, but one of the very heartwarming moments from the past 8 years is when I was on the field. So I was working with Sir Jeevan, and I and a community mobilizer went to a field in a village, in a remote village in the Bunny Grasslands, where pond, a seasonal pond was proposed. So Sajivan was supposed to make that pond. And when we went there, so the area was earmarked already. And at that day, the earth mover was there, and the process was supposed to start. We reached there, and what I saw is there are so many baby spiny-tailed lizard running here and there, and there were their burrows, and almost 20 to 30 spiny-tailed lizards must be there. I saw that, and then I went to this community mobilizer. She's a very good friend also, Bharti ji. I went there and I asked her, where are you going to make the pond? And she's like, here. And then I was like, but here there are so many spiny-tailed lizard, you can't possibly think of making a pond in their homes. And something happened. She understood it, like she immediately understood my point, and then she had to negotiate with the village people for at least 2-3 hours that why we cannot make a pond here, we'll have to find an alternate pond. And it was also a very tricky thing to do in the village, because if my house is near to the pond and I am the sarpanch or maybe the socially dominant person in the household, I want the pond near to my household or my family's house and things like that. It was very charged. It was very politically charged, local politics. But she understood the assignment and she negotiated the hell out of it. And then we stopped the proposal to make the pond there, and we found an alternate locality where there was no burrows. It was already a depression. When rainfall happens, it becomes a pond anyway. So we just widened it and deepened it a bit, and the work was done. So at that point in time, I realized that as a as someone with a keen eye to look at the problems is one thing, but to make it into an action is something very different. And it is an art, and it has to be learned by being on the field, by conversing with people, by making people come together. And that was a learning for me as well. So this is very close to my heart. And I have also written an article after this. It was published in Conservation Optimism.
Mine is also somewhat similar. I used to work on illegal wildlife trade along in regions along the northeastern border of India. And I was in Manipur. I was returning from the border which we have with Myanmar. This place is called More. And a lot of trafficking takes place from this border. Not just wildlife, but a lot of other things also. Drugs, weapons, humans also. And that is where you sort of realize that wildlife just will not picture in a place which has so many things going on. It will not be the priority. And if conservation organizations try and push down this priority down the throats of people who are struggling to, just survive in a conflict-ridden landscape, it's not going to work. Still, I found one person trying to rescue a baby pangolin. And so the mother had been smuggled. And there's this female 8-month-old baby pangolin, which he had rescued. And he told me the entire story about how the mother was killed and trafficked. And I found this little one. They could not take the little one, the smugglers, because the scales were not fully developed. So the animal would not get the same price across the border. It is actually a very dark incident, but like Manya found hope in her pond making thing, I could see hope here in this one person, despite all the society's problems. Manipur has terrible problems going on now, even now. But then to see this one small sign of hope sort of made my entire year, and has really contributed to even starting Conservation Indica to find people like this. And because I saw a pangolin for the first time, even though sadly in the middle of being trafficked, it was my first time holding a pangolin baby. So yeah, that I can still go back to that day in my mind and just be happy about it. So yeah, that was for me.
So that was the fun question and answer today. Thank you so much for taking time out for this podcast.
Thank you, Anish.
Oh, thank you, Anish, for having us.